Well, hi guys. Welcome back for our Proverbs Q&A. This week we're dealing with the topic of money, your questions that you had both before and after the sermon. So this will be actually a shorter video this week, so if you've been noticing the increasing length, don't worry, this one's a bit quicker. So Jason, let's start off. Our very first question on the topic of money and finances is, are we really supposed to give all that we have to the poor to be a good Christian? And then there's a follow-up question to that. How can you do that if that's what we're supposed to do and provide for your family at the same time?
The answer is no. You don't have to give all that you have to the poor. It is important to remember them. You cannot give all your money to the poor and be providing for your family. Then you would actually literally be one of the poor. So I think that the bigger gist is, do I have a heart to take some of what I have and give it for the benefit of others? I think that's the tie-in. I think also I remember talking in the sermon about how money is not my security. And a good way to remind myself of that is to give it away. It also is not ultimately my satisfaction. I can use money as a great tool to an even greater end. And so, no, you don't have to give all your money away to the poor. I think you would actually be sinning against the command to provide for your family to do so.
So just because I know somebody might think of this, someone might say, but didn't Jesus tell the rich young ruler, give away all you have? How does that not apply to me?
Because you may not be rich nor young nor a ruler, and also because that was the thing that was getting in his way from following Christ. Yeah. Christ was like, you need to kick this down. This is your barrier to following me. You need to level that. The way to level it is to give it away. That's a very specific instance of a command given to a very specific person, not one that I'm to go, oh, that's all for me.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. All right. Well, the next question we have is, how do I trust in God to provide? So I'm guessing here the thought is in times that are tough, or when it seems like ends just aren't going to meet, how do I trust God to provide?
Man, I would say one, how is to remember all the ways that God has provided for you before. One of the the second most often repeated command in the entire Old Testament is to remember. Like God's people, we're forgetful. And it hasn't changed, unfortunately, in the 2,000 years of the church. Like, we're forgetful people over and over again. Remember, remember, remember. And so one way that I trust is to remember all the ways in which God has been faithful. Then, based on that, pray. Say, Lord, help me to trust you today and make it good on your promises. You're not doing prosperity gospel, name it, claim it, but asking God, like, Lord, I know you've been faithful to your promises before. I need you to do that again. Read the Psalms and you'll see that. Yeah. So I'd say remember, pray, and then one last thing is get other people praying with you. Mm-hmm. That helps you because they're going to ask, like, how is that going? How's your trust? I've been asked that before when I've asked you to pray for me about stuff. Mm-hmm. You've asked me later on, how's that going? And that's a good accountability. It also builds up my trust in that way, being with others and having them pray with me.
Yeah, and I'll throw this out there, not that someone would do this in a manipulative way by asking people to pray for them, but opening up your burdens to the rest of the people around you. Oftentimes, one of the ways God provides most is through his people. And so, just by having people praying for you, concerned for you, you might have somebody just say, you know what, I can meet that need. Yeah. And, you may not like that because we have issues with people helping us these days, but it is a way that God provides.
Yeah.
And so there's
right.
practical benefit in it too. All right, our next question is, what is the goal of being a good steward of your money? Why do we do this? What makes this a Christian virtue?
Okay, there's a lot of different ways you could probably answer that question. I would say that ultimate goal is the honor and glory of God. Behind that are other good, godly things like, hey, I'm growing in my discipleship. I'm growing as a follower of Jesus. I've been commanded to steward. This is one of those tangible ways I can do that. Another thing, it's a witness to the world. The way I leverage my money for the sake of others, whether it's family, others, or faith family, other people, that is a witness to the world. Hey, dude, why aren't you spending your money on this? Because I'd rather allocate it to that. But that, they can't do you any good. Okay. Like, yeah, to your point, like, this person told me about a need, they are doing me great good. They can't do anything in return. That's even better. I get to bless them. I get to mirror what grace is. You didn't earn it. It's just there. And so I think, like, the ultimate goal, glory and honor of God, but then behind that, like, you grow in your discipleship. You grow in your stewardship. You grow in your ability to reflect the goodness of God in the gospel. And then another thing that you're going to stand out. Why do this? Because it's a command, but then also you do it because you're going to stand out. One of the stats I shared, we are over $1 trillion in credit card debt. The majority of that debt is what I would call not necessary. Some would call it dumb. I'm not going to go quite that far, but not necessary debt. Like, oh, I'm behind in my payments because I went on a shopping spree that you didn't need, or whatever. Man, good stewards of your money, you're going to stand out because our whole country right now is like drowning in this majority non-necessary debt. And so they look at you. What's different about you? Like, you're what they call I've heard this a lot recently, like, your true north is going somewhere else. Like, yeah, would you like to hear more about that? Yeah, they may not agree with you. They may not even agree with, like, hey, I want to honor God with this, but, like, it'll win you an audience for sure.
There's the recognition of wisdom there, even if they don't see the spiritual side of it. There's still, I mean, it's one of the most obviously practical, forward-facing ways you can be wise in the world, because people will see that versus maybe your moral code or things like that. So one more question I thought of as we were talking about this. We've talked about the way you use your money as a witness to the world. We've talked about how God fulfills his needs often through his people. And it occurs to me, we do live in a culture and a time where people sometimes feel shame over receiving generosity and receiving help. And so I guess my question is, how do we practice generosity and cultivate it in our lives, because it is a virtue, in a world where people are so resistant to getting help from others?
Wow. So I think there's probably two ways to work on that. One is like practice what I would call guerrilla generosity. Like, don't give them a chance to refuse you. Just figure out a way, whether it's you, hey, can you give this to so-and-so? Oh, sure. Don't tell them it's for me. And then, like, oh, what do I do with this? You know, put a note, this is for this, or, you know, whatever. So I am personally a fan of guerrilla generosity. I've had to learn to be different in the way I do it because they're on to my methods. But I think another way to cultivate that is, if you're especially on the receiving end, remember Ephesians, like, grace you have been saved through faith, not of yourselves. It's a gift of God, not of works, lest anyone should boast. Like, you did nothing to deserve the grace of God. This generosity that's being bestowed upon you is to remind you of God's grace. It is God's grace, and it's to remind you of God's grace. And if I'm receiving something that I'm like, I don't need this, or you shouldn't have done this, I have to remind myself, this is a gift of grace. Oh,
I've already received something infinitely more.
Right.
You know.
This is just a snapshot
Yeah.
of that. And I think for those who are like really reticent to receive help, like how reticent are you to receive God's grace? You're like, no, I need it. Okay, well. And then for those who give, like, man, I would just say, I'm using this word, I'm not trying to be silly with it, but like giving to others is very addictive. It's in a good way. Like you are very mindful of like, oh, I want to help this person, or I want to bless this person. They don't even need my help. I'm just want to go, hey, go on a date night. Like here, you know, here's whatever. I don't even know how much date nights cost for everyone anymore. But like, say, here's $150. Get a babysitter. Go on a date night. Like, why'd you do that? Because I love you. Because God's been good to me too. Yeah. So does that make sense?
Yeah. The ability to find joy in the joy of others is amazing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, guys, that's our questions for this week. We'll be back next week with our last Q&A in this series, and that'll be on the topic of technology.
Yeah.
So hopefully these have been beneficial to you, and we'll see you next time.
All right. See you guys.